demanded to see Henry, begged to plead before the man who once claimed he could not live without her. There was no mercy. Norfolk, her own blood, announced she was under arrest and would be taken to the Tower of London. The Tower where traitors went to die. For a moment Anne could not breathe. She asked for her father, her brother, anyone who would stand with her. The council offered only orders. Escorted to a barge, Anne travelled down the Thames as crowds gathered along the riverbank, some jeering, others stunned into silence. The woman who once rode these waters in triumph now sat pale and trembling, a prisoner in everything but chains. At the Tower she was led through the entrance. Not the Traitors' Gate, she was still an anointed queen, but the mercy felt hollow. She was taken to the Queen's apartments, the same rooms where she had prepared for her coronation. The irony was unbearable. Those walls had once held her dreams. Now they held her fate, constantly watched, every word recorded. The trap had closed with brutal efficiency engineered by Cromwell, sanctioned by a king already turning to his next bride. The Queen's apartments became a gilded cage. Anne paced like an animal, memory pressing in from every tapestry and beam. In the first hours, she broke down, completely hysterical, demanding answers. Where was her father? Where was George? Who accused her? Why? One moment she wept uncontrollably. The next, she laughed high and brittle, sending shivers through those who heard it. Sometimes she prayed with frantic devotion, clinging to faith as the only anchor left. Other times she raged, insisting God knew the truth even if men refused it. Her ladies-in-waiting, appointed and monitored by Cromwell's network, watched closely, exchanging uneasy glances. This was not the composed queen they remembered. This was a woman unraveling. Sleep became impossible. Nights stretched long and airless. Anne lay awake, listening to footsteps outside her door. Distant voices, the creak of hinges. Every sound felt like the start of the end. Would they come to interrogate her? Would they announce the execution date? The uncertainty gnawed at her more than any blade. During the day, she demanded details. She questioned Sir William Kingston, the Constable of the Tower. Repeatedly, when she learned her brother George had been arrested and charged with incest, with her shock turned to horror. The accusation was designed to annihilate sympathy. Few would defend a queen painted as a creature of vile depravity. Yet even inside hysteria, Anne found flashes of clarity. She began to understand the machinery. This wasn't punishment for real crimes. It was removal. She had failed to deliver a son, and now she was inconvenient. That realization was devastating, but it brought a terrible calm. If the verdict was already decided, then pleading was pointless. Anne was trapped in a nightmare without escape except death. May 15th, 1536. Anne Boleyn was led into the King's Hall at the Tower of London. 2,000 spectators packed the galleries, hungry to witness the Queen's destruction. Anne wore black velvet trimmed with fur, a scarlet petticoat beneath. Despite the terror, she held her head high, scanning the room for mercy and finding none. Before her sat the jury, peers of the realm, loyal to the king. Among them was Henry Percy, the man Anne had once loved before Henry shattered their engagement. Percy's face was pale, drawn as if the moment was killing him too. Presiding over the spectacle was Anne's own uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, blood turned judge. The charges were read aloud: adultery with 5 men, incest with her brother, treason, conspiracy to murder the king. Each accusation was more grotesque than the last, constructed not just to convict, but to disgust. Anne pleaded not guilty. With calm precision, she denied everything, defending herself with clarity so sharp that even some in the room struggled to believe she could be guilty. But evidence didn't matter. The trial was theatre. Cromwell's prosecution relied on coerced statements. twisted timelines, and fear. Mark Smeaton, a court musician, was the only one to confess, likely under torture. The others maintained innocence. The jury deliberated briefly. Then, one by one, they declared her guilty. Norfolk pronounced the sentence: death by burning or beheading at the king's pleasure. Anne did not flinch. She asked for time to prepare her soul. The executioner's axe turned toward her, a symbol of condemnation, as she was escorted out. Henry Percy collapsed and had to be carried away. Anne walked steadily, as if already stepping beyond life. In the days that followed, something changed in Anne. The hysteria faded into eerie calm that unsettled even her jailers. She took communion repeatedly, swearing on the consecrated host that she was innocent. In Tudor England, to lie during the Eucharist risked eternal damnation. Yet Anne did it without hesitation, as if she had nothing left to lose. On the eve of her execution, she made a dark joke that history would never forget. She told Kingston she'd heard the executioner was very skilled, then placed her hands around her neck and laughed. "I have a little neck. Gallows humor, terrible. Sharp, like a mind stepping away from pain by turning it into something almost unreal." Henry granted a final mercy. Anne would die by sword, not axe. A French swordsman was summoned, his blade swifter than the brutal English method. It was less kindness than calculation. Henry wanted a controlled, civil execution. May 19th, 1536, Anne rose before dawn and dressed carefully in a dark gown trimmed with fur. A white cap fitted to keep her hair away from her neck. She prayed and waited. The execution time shifted, stretching the morning into agony. But Anne held herself with unnatural composure. Finally, Kingston came. She walked across the courtyard to Tower Green. This was not a public spectacle, no massive crowd, no city chaos, only a contained gathering of courtiers and officials, a private killing inside stone walls. On the scaffold, Anne addressed the crowd. She spoke no condemnation. She praised Henry as a merciful prince, asked for prayers, and submitted her fate to God. Some heard irony. Others saw protection because every word was chosen to shield her daughter Elizabeth from becoming a traitor's child. Then she knelt. The executioner called for the sword. Anne turned her head, and the blade fell in a single clean stroke. Cannons fired from the tower, signalling to London, the Queen is dead. Anne's ladies wept as they gathered her body and head, wrapping them in linen. No proper coffin had been prepared. The woman who had once dazzled courts and fractured empires was placed into a simple chest and buried in an unmarked grave at the chapel of St. Tyne. Peter ad Vincula steps from where she died. But Anne Boleyn's execution did not end her impact. It detonated a transformation that reshaped England. Henry's desire to marry Anne had driven the break with Rome. The Pope's refusal to grant an annulment pushed Henry toward the act of supremacy and the creation of the Church of England, with the king as its head. Monasteries were dissolved. Land was seized. Loyalty oaths were enforced at the cost of lives. Anne's influence extended beyond marriage politics. She supported reformers and encouraged the spread of scripture in English. Even after her death, the religious and political turbulence continued through future reigns, flipping between Protestant power and persecution until her daughter Elizabeth rose. Over the centuries, Anne's legacy has been endlessly rewritten. To enemies, she was temptress, witch, warning. To others, she was a revolutionary force, a woman who insisted on agency in a world built to deny it. And in the figure of Elizabeth I, her bloodline and defiance returned to the throne, reshaping the nation again. History tried to erase Anne by destroying her reputation. Instead, it multiplied her. Every era recasts her villain, martyr, survivor, catalyst. In the end, her story remains a testament to ambition, conviction, and the brutal price of power in a kingdom where love could turn lethal overnight.